On July 22nd, a fierce protest erupted in front of the Chinese embassy in Seoul, South Korea. Thousands of angry South Koreans gathered, chanting, "CCP out, CCP out." The atmosphere was charged. Protesters tore up banners featuring the Chinese flags and portraits of Xi Jinping, chairman of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, Wang, Huning, and the Chinese ambassador to South Korea, Dai Bing. They threw bottles, paint cans, and eggs at the embassy, and some even attempted to scale the embassy's walls with ladders. The protest lasted nearly 2 hours. Since former South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol declared a brief state of emergency in December last year, which followed his impeachment by the National Assembly, the streets of Gangnam in Seoul have become the battlefield for protests. One of the reasons for the emergency declaration was the severe infiltration of Chinese and North Korean communism into South Korea. Tens of thousands of citizens waved South Korean flags and American flags, marching along a designated route, shouting, "Expel the CCP," and "Oppose election fraud." They accused the CCP of infiltrating South Korea, meddling in domestic affairs, and manipulating elections, particularly criticizing the newly elected president Lee Jae-myung's pro-China stance. They labeled Lee as a puppet of the CCP. Since Lee Jae-myung took office on June 4th, public skepticism regarding election fraud and his pro-China policies has grown. Protesters have accused the CCP of using media manipulation, financial support, and internet trolls to interfere in South Korea's elections, helping Lee Jae-myung rise to power. They also pointed fingers at CCP high official Wang Huning, calling him the chief architect of United Front infiltration. The protesters believe that the CCP not only threatens South Korea's sovereignty but also attempts to control public opinion, education, and businesses, eroding the democratic system. The march in Gangnam streets wasn't just an emotional release, but a collective effort to defend freedom and sovereignty. Protesters held up banners and shouted, "Expose the truth, protect South Korea." One protester said, "Chinese communism is eroding South Korea, and I'm here to protect the people's sovereignty. The president is acting like a dictator, and ordinary people are kept in the dark. We must wake everyone up through action." Another shouted, "We must drive away the red shadow and raise South Korea's flag high. Holding the Taiji flag, we stand against betrayal with iron will." A protester summed it up, "South Korea is not China's vassal state. We won't let the CCP define our future." The July 22nd protest in front of the Chinese embassy was the climax of ongoing protests in South Korea. The primary trigger was the arrest of Yoon Suk-yeol on new charges, including obstruction of justice and abuse of power, just 4 months after his release. This event reignited public anger, leading even more people to gather in front of the Chinese embassy. Strangely, the protest barely made waves in China. Unlike previous embassy clashes, which were heavily reported on, the incident was only mentioned in an August 1st article on Sohu. The article criticized South Korean police for being almost invisible and failing to take effective measures to stop the protest, even allowing the crowd to attack the embassy. It also criticized President Lee Jae-myung for staying silent during the incident and not protecting China-South Korean relations. The CCP expressed strong dissatisfaction, and China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs issued a 72-hour ultimatum to South Korea, demanding an investigation into the incident, punishment for those responsible, and accountability for the police's dereliction of duty. The article also blamed U.S.-funded anti-China projects in South Korea for escalating tensions between the two countries. Several accounts on Douyin have posted videos with similar rhetoric, such as, "The Chinese embassy in South Korea was violently attacked, igniting the anger of 1.4 billion Chinese people." These posts attempt to stir up patriotic sentiment among the public. However, in stark contrast to the official sensational narrative, discussions on Zhihu, a popular Chinese platform, are filled with sarcastic mockery. One user wrote, "Don't just say Lee Jae-myung stayed silent. Even Chinese people are staying silent and not taking it seriously. In the past, when embassies were attacked, it was a big deal. But now, unless it's the US attacking a Chinese embassy, no one reacts. Other countries can riot, but no one cares." Another person sarcastically commented, "What's the big deal? I thought the Koreans were coming to steal my eggs." Others downplayed the situation, saying, "Russia has attacked several consulates, and we've gotten used to it. Embassies don't represent citizens anymore, so let them be destroyed." One user mocked further, "Please, official media, tell us the whole story. Why did they attack your embassy? What were the protesters' slogans? Only after you explain it clearly will I know if I should be angry." Clearly, the CCP's patriotic drama has completely backfired. Today's internet users are already awake. The protests in Jiangyo Sichuan have already shown people the true nature of the CCP government. Why should the people worry about the Chinese embassy in South Korea being attacked when this government doesn't even care about its own people? The correct stance is to watch passively, eat melon seeds, and watch the show. However, perhaps under pressure from the CCP, the Lee Jae-myung government eventually responded. According to reports from the Korea Herald, on August 10th, a police station in Seoul began an investigation into the social group Free University, which was involved in the July 22nd protest and allegedly insulted the Chinese embassy. Relevant individuals were summoned for questioning. The group supports former President Yoon Suk-yeol and was accused of tearing up the Chinese flag and portraits of Chinese leaders, violating South Korea's criminal code, which punishes insults to foreign diplomats or their honor with a maximum sentence of 3 years in prison. Analysis suggests that since Lee Jae-myung's election as president on June 4th, he has been labeled pro-China by the public. Many in South Korean society have raised doubts that his rise to power was aided by CCP manipulation in the elections. In the face of the July 22nd embassy protest, Lee initially chose to remain silent, attempting to balance domestic anti-China sentiment with pressure from the CCP. Lee's caution is also reflected in his handling of foreign relations. In late July, during crucial South Korea-US tariff negotiations, the Trump administration took a hard stance on South Korea. If Lee had been too pro-China in his protest response, he would have struggled to earn the US's trust, potentially jeopardizing the negotiation outcomes. On July 30th, South Korea and the US reached a preliminary trade agreement, with the US imposing a 15% tariff on South Korean products, avoiding the 25% tariff that was set to be implemented on August 1st. Only after the tariff negotiations were concluded on August 10th did the Lee government begin to take action against the protesters. On August 6th, South Korea's Prime Minister, Kim Min-sok, announced that from September 29th to June 30th, 2026, Chinese group tourists would be allowed to enter South Korea without a visa. The Lee government's suppression of protesters and its conciliatory attitude toward the CCP have fueled greater public anger. On August 10th, more people took to the streets of Seoul to protest the Lee administration's gradual erosion of South Korea's democracy and sovereignty under CCP influence. In addition to opposing CCP infiltration into South Korea, recent disorderly behavior by Chinese tourists in visa-free cities has further intensified anger toward both the Chinese people and the CCP. These disorderly behavior include littering, making loud noises, skipping lines, taking secret photos in bathhouses, and even getting involved in criminal cases. As a result, the South Korean government's decision to grant visa-free entry to Chinese tourists nationwide has left many people disappointed. Earlier, a video of a Chinese tourist violently attacking a South Korean taxi driver went viral in South Korea, sparking public outrage. On the morning of March 12th, a taxi driver in his 50s was transporting a couple, suspected to be Chinese nationals, in Seoul. During the ride, the woman, having an argument with her boyfriend, demanded that the car stop and tried to open the door. The automatic lock prevented the door from opening, and when the driver tried to stop her, she became furious and repeatedly punched him in the head, causing bleeding and tinnitus. The boyfriend attempted to intervene, but was verbally abused by the woman in Cantonese. After the driver unlocked the door and continued driving, the woman attacked him again. The driver eventually reached a safe place and called the police. The man fled the scene, and the police arrived to take the woman in for questioning. A few hours later, the police informed the driver that the woman was Chinese, had been drunk at the time, and now wanted to apologize. However, she was leaving for Hong Kong that day and asked if the driver would settle the matter. The driver, due to his injuries, refused to settle at the time. The next day, the police informed him that the woman had already left the country, stating foreign criminals are not necessarily detained or banned from leaving the country. The driver was unable to pursue the case or receive compensation, prompting him to file a national petition, accusing the police of leniency toward foreign criminals. Local lawyers Song Soo-hoo pointed out that, since the woman left the country, it would be difficult for South Korean law to hold her accountable. Under the Immigration Control Act, foreign criminals can be subject to a departure stop or emergency departure stop, but the police did not take action in this case. The woman's actions were considered general assault and violence against a driver, which carries a maximum sentence of 5 years in prison or a fine of about $15,000. The incident triggered more than 6,000 comments on YouTube, with South Korean netizens angrily criticizing the police for inaction. The responsible police officers should be disciplined. Why protect foreign criminals instead of citizens? If a South Korean committed a crime in China, they would have been detained and banned from leaving the country. This incident further fueled South Korean public discontent with Chinese tourists. In recent years, South Korean public opinion of the CCP has sharply declined. Data from South Korea's Daily Economic shows that in 2015, only 16% of South Koreans had a negative view of China, but by 2020, this has risen to 40%. A 2022 survey by Seoul National University's Asia Institute revealed a jump to 91%, and in 2024, a Pew Research Center poll found that the number had reached 97%. As a developed economy, South Korea stands in stark contrast to communist North Korea, which has led to dissatisfaction from the CCP. Since the establishment of diplomatic ties between China and South Korea in 1992, the CCP has gradually increased its infiltration into South Korea. Under the guise of economic cooperation and cultural exchange, the CCP has been exporting communist ideology to South Korea. Over the past 30 years, the CCP has cultivated a vast network of agents in South Korea, including politicians, scholars, business leaders, and some ordinary citizens, aiming to influence societal thought and cultivate pro-CCP factions. However, the mainstream South Korean public has shown a strong aversion to this infiltration, evolving from passive resistance to public protests, which eventually escalated into the fierce street demonstrations previously described. A key focus of the protests has been the CCP's interference in South Korea's elections, which has been particularly egregious. In the 2025 presidential election, the progressive camp led by Lee Jae-myung won, with the White House issuing a congratulatory statement that also warned about CCP interference in the democratic process. Prior to the election, there was a surge of online disinformation, with pro-CCP information controlling over 30% of mainstream media outlets, spreading rumors such as Trump supports a particular candidate to mislead voters about Lee Jae-myung's pro-China stance. AFP fact-checks revealed that thousands of fake posts were largely coming from pro-China accounts. South Korea's left-wing parties, benefiting from support from pro-CCP media, saw support in urban constituencies rise to as much as 45%. Logically, this form of indirect interference is both efficient and low risk. Direct manipulation of voting machines requires overcoming technical and cultural barriers, but funding pro-China factions can amplify influence through financial networks and media platforms such as WeChat and TikTok. Data shows that globally, in 80% of CCP election interference cases, indirect methods were used, such as supporting specific political parties in the 2019 and 2021 Canadian elections. Before the 2023 National Assembly elections, South Korea's National Intelligence Service exposed the CCP's Haigo Technology and Shanghai Haishun Technology Company, which disguised themselves as South Korean media outlets, spreading pro-communist and anti-American content to manipulate public opinion. At the same time, the CCP's internet troops left over 30,000 comments on South Korean portals within 3 hours, attacking the U.S.-South Korea alliance and dividing public consensus. Furthermore, electronic voting equipment supplied by Huawei was criticized for lacking biometric verification, raising concerns about data manipulation. Additionally, a memory report reveals that the CCP uses bribery and cultural influence to support pro-China politicians. The CCP corrupts South Korean officials, turning them into CCP spies. According to an insider, Wang, a former ambassador to Antigua and Barbuda, once casually shared his achievement at a gathering while drinking Mao Tai liquor. He proudly revealed how he had successfully recruited a South Korean official to become a spy. While working at the CCP's visa office in Hong Kong, Wang received a task from the organization to extract confidential information from a South Korean official. He used his trump card, arranging a beauty to seduce the official and bombarding him with bribes. The official was completely corrupted, and after a drunken night, shared some of the information Wang wanted. The South Korean official eventually became a CCP spy, regularly providing confidential information about South Korea. In recent years, rumors about the CCP setting up secret police bases in South Korea have garnered widespread attention. According to the Korea Herald, South Korean police and intelligence agencies have investigated several secret CCP police bases, disguised as restaurants. The investigation revealed hidden security networks operating within South Korean society. Public records indicate that the CCP's influence in South Korea primarily operates through official channels and Chinese community organizations. The CCP, through its United Front network, influences parts of the Chinese community, with some non-official Chinese organizations accused of gathering intelligence and monitoring political dissent. South Korean media and intelligence agencies have repeatedly exposed the CCP's use of these channels for information collection and surveillance of dissidents. dissidents. In addition, South Korea's National Intelligence Service and police have uncovered several espionage cases involving the CCP. Some of these cases involve South Korean Chinese nationals collecting military and political intelligence for the CCP. The CCP has also been accused of conducting cross-border arrests and stability maintenance operations abroad, using these underground networks to pressure dissidents. However, these activities are often carried out covertly. Economically, South Korea, as a leader in industries such as semiconductors, display panels, and shipbuilding, has become a key target for CCP infiltration. In 2024, the trade volume between China and South Korea reached $340 billion. The CCP seeks to acquire South Korea's advanced technology, such as 5G and dual-use military and civilian materials. It does so through investments, joint ventures, and supply chain dependencies, while also seeking control over critical infrastructure like energy and ports. This puts South Korea in a difficult position geopolitically. Strategically, the CCP aims to divide the US-Japan-South Korea alliance and weaken America's footing in northeast China. By exacerbating historical conflicts between Japan and South Korea, such as the comfort women issue and the Dokdo dispute, the CCP fuels tensions between the two countries, with the goal of isolating the US and containing Japan and South Korea. Ideological penetration is at the core of the CCP strategy. The CCP has established 10 Confucius Institutes at well-known South Korean universities, officially promoting Chinese language education, but in reality influencing the younger generation by instilling communist ideology. These institutions have sparked controversy due to their suppression of academic freedom and censorship of sensitive content, prompting South Korean society to be wary of the CCP's soft power. The CCP also uses pro-China media and social media platforms to guide public opinion, creating an environment favorable to itself and paving the way for political and economic infiltration. The CCP's infiltration encompasses ideological export, election interference, economic control, technology theft, and geopolitical maneuvering, an all-encompassing conspiracy. However, the South Korean public has awakened to its dangers. From the wave of South Korean flags on the streets of Seoul to egging the Chinese embassy, the people are sending a clear message: South Korea is not a vassal of the CCP. The CCP's erosion of South Korean democracy is destined to fall. The awakening and resistance of South Korean society not only serve as a direct counterattack against CCP infiltration, but also signal the triumph of freedom and democracy. The people's cries echo through the streets: expel the CCP, defend South Korea.